Shabbat Shalom. As most of you know, I think by now, you all follow me on Facebook, I think most of you do. I just returned from Israel, literally yesterday. So right now, it's about 6 o'clock in the morning, Israel time. And I know Richard was also just there, so you can add in whatever you want from your perspective, Richard. We didn't get to see each other there, but our trips kind of overlapped. But I was on a really different kind of trip than Richard was on a sightseeing tour. And as you know, this is my umpteenth, millionth visit to Israel. This was not a sightseeing tour. I was accompanying 30 rabbinical students as part of AIPAC. I was one of the rabbinic advisors. And these rabbinical students are Reform from all three of our campuses of stateside, Cincinnati, New York, and Los Angeles of Hebrew Union College, of our seminary. The conservative movement, Ziegler, which is here at AJU, and Jewish Theological Seminary, which is in New York, and two Orthodox rabbinical seminaries, Yeshiva University, and Chovevei Torah. So it was a very wide-ranging trip, and this is a special group of AIPAC rabbinical students. They have a special fellowship sponsored by Michael and Lisa Leffell Foundation, so they're called Leffell Fellowship. And if you recall, I went last year when Rabbi Chenkin was still a rabbinical student. We were on the same trip together last year, and I was a rabbinic mentor. And there's one Reform rabbi, one conservative rabbi, one Orthodox rabbi that get to accompany the students as we travel through Israel. Most of our time was spent in Jerusalem, because of course that is the capital of the state of Israel. And we did go up for one overnight up north, and then we went to spend a couple nights in Tel Aviv, but mostly in Tel Aviv was kind of a pass-through, so we could go to other places. What's different about this particular trip was this is not, let's go visit the Western Wall, let's go to Masada. It's not birthright for rabbinical students. They don't need that. They've all studied there. They've all had, many of them did a junior year abroad at Hebrew University. Many of them have gone to yeshiva there. Many of them, at least the HUC and JTS and Ziegler students, spend 1 year of their rabbinical studies there for sure. So they don't need, let's do an archaeology dig for a day or go to the beach and hang out. This is a grueling trip of mostly 15 and 16 and 17-hour days, often starting at 7 a.m. and going to 11 o'clock at night. These are briefings. These are meeting with the leaders of Israel in government, in the army, experts on security situation, on the political situation, and what an amazing time and moment in Israel's life to be there. Why? Because the Knesset was dissolved. Israel's parliament was dissolved, and they set elections for April 9th. Mark that day on your calendar, April 9th. So everything in Israel is topsy-turvy right now. And all of the political parties, it's not a two-party system like ours. It's a parliamentary system, much more modeled like England's democracy. Remember who controlled Palestine, i.e. Israel, before 1948? The Brits. So they used a lot of British modeling. There are multiple parties, right? And to get a government, you have to have a coalition, right? There's 120 seats. It's unicameral, one house. 120 seats in the Knesset, so a majority, you have to have 61 seats. No party in the history of Israel in all of its 70 plus years has ever had a majority government. Every government has been a coalition government. Sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes in the center, sometimes joint between right and center left. But no one party has ever taken the whole shebang. So this is kind of important to remember, and it affects how decisions are made. Things that to our American minds seem, this is ridiculous. Of course, this is Jewish values. It should go this way. But you have to make a coalition with very strange bedfellows. So things don't always work out the way we Americans think they ought to work out. I don't think America works out like we thought it should work out either so much these days, but that's a whole nother story. So we met with we met people on the far, far left. We met people on the far, far right, and we met people in the middle. And so some of the most interesting conversations were about this reshuffling of the political parties that are happening in Israel. So many of you might remember Michael Oren. He was the ambassador, Israel's ambassador to the United States. He was an academic. And in this last Knesset, he was a member of the Kulanu party. Well, he announced that he was leaving Kulanu, which only came up in the last election, right? It's a party that formed at the last election. And he's kind of shopping his wares to see what new party might be worth a match. And the Labor Party, which for years had been in control, had been the ruling party, if you will, in Israel, the Labor Party, Social Democrats, party of Ben-Gurion, right, was kind of in the last election, they brought in this new guy, Avi Gabay. Avi Gabay is really much more, actually, he's from industry. He was a CEO. So not your typical labor type, right? He is management. And he was head of the party, but he didn't sit in the Knesset. In the Knesset, they made kind of a union with Tzipi Livni. Some of you have heard of her. She represents the Hatnua party. And so they made a kind of joint party called the Zionist Union, which was a center-left party. Well, just the other day, I think it was like yesterday or Wednesday, Avi Gabay gets up in front of a bank of television cameras and dumps Tzipi Livni in a public way without having notified her. So now there's a backlash against him, and the party's trying to get rid of him. It's very interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen to her. I don't know what's going to happen to him. And we don't know what's going to happen to kind of the labor, center-left parties. There's the far left, which is Meretz. They're the far, 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 far left. Then there's all of the Haredi and religious parties. Most interesting, Naftali Bennett, who is the Minister of Diaspora Affairs, who had been part of Beit Yehudi, which is kind of a national religious party. He left just the other day with Ayelet Shaked, who's the justice minister, who is a far-right, secular, not religious, secular woman, and they formed a new party together. So this is Netanyahu is Likud. Look, that was Menachem Begin's party. Likud, okay? So that's there, but there are people branching off from the Likud party. They're still probably in all the polling as of today, and we met with a couple of Israeli pollsters as part of this to kind of understand what the scene is. Likud will probably still win the most seats, and depending on what happens to Bibi, he's might be indicted for some graft. So watch in February about whether or not he will be indicted. He's announced while we were there that he wasn't stepping down no matter what. So it's a really, you think what's volatile here, it's just as volatile there. And we don't know what Israel's going to look like or what policies. And this is important because we don't know what policies will happen because we don't know what coalitions will come about as it. Will it be a center-right? Will it be a right? Beyond the center? Will it be center-left? Is there some way to do a coalition government between center-right, center-left? It's really unclear because we don't know how all of the parties. A big unknown is the former chief of the IDF. He's a general who just retired, is forming a new party, but nobody really knows what he stands for or what he says because he hasn't said what he stands for. They just know that they like him because he was a chief in the army, and the army holds such an important role in Israel. So it remains to be seen as he opens his mouth what we'll see. One of the most interesting parts of this trip was going to Jericho for part of the morning and sitting literally next to, I'm going to sit next to you for a minute, sitting this close to Saeb Erekat, who's the number 2 in the PLO. He has been the man who has been the chief negotiator for all of the PLO. And he's, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, is in his late 80s. He's a chain smoker and in terrible health. And Saeb Erekat just had, I think it was a liver transplant this last spring in D.C. He looks good. His coloring's really good. My doctors are here. His coloring's really good. But he's no spring chicken either. He's in his 70s also. Sitting with him in his office in Jericho was certainly an interesting moment. I mean, I literally I was the one sitting next to him like this. But it's really clear that he is a man who has lost a lot of hope. he's lost a lot of hope, because what he has tried to deliver for the Palestinian people is their own country. But he is really a secularist. I want you to understand this. He is a secularist. He's not a Muslim extremist in any way, sense of the form. He's really a secularist. But what has happened on the streets in the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and certainly really Gaza is a whole other situation, but it has gotten increasingly more and further away from the right, to the right, and more religious, less secular. And so I think the dream, what became clear in the discussion, is the dream of perhaps a two-state solution is fading. It's fading not only from the Palestinian side, because they don't feel like they can negotiate it, it's fading from the Israeli side. And ironically, what was interesting, I think, for me, it didn't matter whether we talked to religious Zionists or secular Zionists in Israel, whether we talked to people on the left, the center, or the right in Israel. There isn't a lot of hope that the solution for a two-state solution will happen in Israel. Certainly not in their lifetime. Oslo is ancient history. Remember the Oslo Accords of 9? Oslo is ancient history. It's not even in the rearview mirror anymore. And the question is, what will it be? Will it be a one-state solution, meaning Israel will be the state? Which brings a whole host of issues. How do you have a Jewish, democratic Israel if 30% of your population ain't Jewish? Well, not all. I mean, there's Christian Arabs, there's Israeli Arabs who are full citizens and want to be there, but there are issues, right? When your national anthem is Hatikva and talks about longing of the Jewish soul for 2,000 years, and that's not yours, you don't have a Jewish soul, but you're a full citizen and you're an Israeli citizen as an Arab, what does that mean? So I want to be clear, I don't have solutions to these dilemmas. I'm trying to just give you a sense of what I learned while I was there. And I think, and for Israelis, we met with a number of settlers, including Oded Ravivi, who is the mayor of Efrat, which is over the Green Line. It's in the Gush. The Gush, it's really a suburb of Jerusalem. The Gush was an area that was lost in the War of Independence. It was initially part of Israel in 1948, a division, a partition. It was lost in 1948 to the Jordanians, so it's considered over the Green Line. It's considered a settlement. Okay. No one thinks that when the final negotiations, if a final negotiations ever comes, that it will remain over the Green Line. It will stay part of Israel. Okay? Everyone, even the Palestinians think that. They won't admit that, but they think that. Like Peter. And then we met with other settlers from Ariel, which is a whole different kettle of fish, because to get to Ariel, it's in the middle of the West Bank, what we call Judea and Samaria in Jewish terms. West Bank is not necessarily Jewish terms. That was the term that Jordan gave to that area. We call it, from our biblical times, Judea and Shomron, the areas, Judea and Samaria. So to get to Ariel, which is in the middle of West, not like Efrat, which is like, oh, you're down the road from Jerusalem. It's a suburb, right? It's like going over to Studio City. It's connected, right? Ariel is like as if you were driving out to the Inland Empire. Not as far. And to get there, there's only one road in and one road back, and everything around it. But Ariel, when you hear the word settlement, what do you think of? You kind of think, oh, temporary, right? These are full cities. This isn't a bunch of caravans or mobile homes, for the most part. Ariel's a real city with a university and hospitals and streets and street lights. Same thing. Efrat, I don't know, I couldn't afford to live in Efrat. It's, starts out at $1.5 million for a house. Right? This is expensive. So you have to be careful. I mean, part of the learning for me is not that settlements aren't just temporary places. There are some that are temporary, and in fact, one was dismantled just yesterday. That were just what they call caravans, 2 trailers at the top of the hill, outposts that the Israeli army took down. But many of these are just like new neighborhoods being built. There's a population explosion. There's more Jews coming from the former Soviet Union, more Jews coming from France to escape the anti-Semitism. So where are you going to put all these people? That's part of the challenge of this. What do cities do when they need new neighborhoods and they have to build? They either tear down the old housing stock and build new, i.e. West Hollywood, right? Or if there's empty land, what do cities do? They build. This is part of the dilemma of Jerusalem, but there's also, do not mistake, there is a political agenda to begin to take neighborhoods and more land. And as both Ariel Sharon used to say and Menachem Begin used to say, facts on the ground. When there's houses, you can't just, what do you do with them? So my point in sharing all of this with you is I don't have a solution to these very difficult problems. And I have to tell you, I'm not sure how I feel about all of it. I mean, there's no question that if we read the Torah, when we do read the Torah, the areas that are Judea and Shomron, Judea and Samaria, are the place where our history and our stories took place. We read, that's where King David was, that's where King Saul was. This is the story of our tribes, of our people, right? That's our claim. But we made a decision that a night when the UN decided to divide and partition Palestine, the British mandate, on the 29th of November in 1947, that those in charge at the time, David Ben-Gurion and in the provisional government, accepted the fact that we would give up land that was part of the history of our people to have a state. That was a decision that the founders of Israel made. So I don't know what the right answer is, and I don't know that what became clear out of this trip is that the Israelis don't know. Okay, I'm going to conclude with this. We also spent really serious time on the Syrian border, on the Lebanese border, and on the Gaza border. Syria is no longer Syria as we know it. Bashar al-Assad is in charge again. Millions of people have died and are missing. Millions have left Syria. There's more than 2 million Syrians living in Jordan. There's 1 million that went, at least 1.5 million to Europe and elsewhere around the world. There's many living in Lebanon and in other places. But they're just people they can't be counted for. Syria is basically one big cement rubble. And so if you want to make money, the construction is what to be in, and rubble removing is the business to be in, because there's a lot of money to be made in Syria, because that's what's happening there. What's also happening there is the Iranians have moved in and hunkered down. And they are building not only bases, they've taken over what were entire towns, and they are building and entrenching so that that is the front line against their war against Israel and America. Same thing in Lebanon, on the border with Lebanon. Hezbollah, again sponsored by Iran. We were going to our briefing, and we were riding on the road along the border, and there's 3 Hezbollah guys out walking. You never used to see this. They used to hide. So while we were there, they discovered that Hezbollah, like Hamas down south, has built tunnels under the border. And the army, the IDF, has gone and destroyed 5. They found 5 tunnels that they filled up with cement and blocked them. So what used to be a few thousand Katyusha rockets were, they don't have navigational system. They're basically a piece of metal, kind of like you used to do in science project, when you shoot a rocket up, and it was very simple, nothing. They could do a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't. Now they're all missiles. Missiles with guidance, serious missiles. And there are tens of thousands of them pointed at Israel. When Israel went into Lebanon in 2006, part of the settlement with the UN, that the UN was going to go in and monitor so that that would be, the south of Lebanon would be arms free. Let me just tell you, it's not. But also the Iranians are now openly coming and working with Hezbollah. In the south, we were at Kibbutz Aza, that has been under constant rocket fire and missile fire. They have 10 seconds when they hear a red alert. So imagine if you're showering and putting goop in your hair and you hear the red alert. What are you supposed to do? How do you get to a shelter in 10 seconds from when you hear the sound? They showed us the incendiary devices. You heard about the balloons. Some of them they're very clever. They've used condoms to hold the fuel and soaked Tampexes. And then they have an incendiary device, and they send it with those little parachute, and they send it right over the border, and it's burned tens of thousands of acres. Now, the situation in Gaza is terrible. Israel sends about 1,000 trucks a week with humanitarian aid and food. But the problem is with Fatah, that control the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood, which, remember, in Egypt, al-Sisi, the general, took over. What did he do? He kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood. So Egypt doesn't like them either, and they've shut down everything. So they're being squeezed from many areas, and again, another very difficult situation. What's the upside to all of this? Israel's still a thriving country with a lot of hope, even though they might not have hope about a solution. Israel is a thriving nation with lots of arts and culture and restaurants, and incredible. They just hit their 4 millionth tourist this year. So it's not deterring people from visiting or to going there from around the world. Its science and technology efforts are transformative and healing around the world. And so even with all of these difficulties, we bring our American mindset to it, and I guess the caution I would say is this. Our American brain doesn't always work there. And so what is our role? Our role is to, I believe, our role as Jews is to continue to support Israel. It is our homeland. It is the birthplace. It is the tie for our Jewish souls. It helps shapes our Jewish souls. And therefore, we have a deep connection with Israel, whether you've ever been there or not. And regardless of your politics, because we don't vote in Israeli elections, we have an opportunity to help Israel and to stand by Israel, and to then continue to help shape it by helping make sure that Israel is safe and secure so that it can deal with its internal issues in a democratic way with one another. So I'm going this year in March is the annual AIPAC Policy Conference in Washington, D.C. So this is my annual pitch for those of you that would like to learn more about how you can help Israel and support Israel in these kind of crazy world, in these crazy times. There's workshops on everything from Iran to technology to this political bubbling pot of new elections, so it'll be interesting. It's a few weeks before the election, and you'll hear from every major Israeli politician and speaker, and you'll hear from every major American politician on both sides of the aisle who will be there from the House and the Senate. And the thing that I like about AIPAC the most is that it really is bipartisan, meaning the work that AIPAC does is on both sides of the aisle with Democrats and Republicans to ensure that Israel lives long and prosper, as they say, so that it can work out its internal policies and internal problems. We pray in the highest of manner. So I look forward to opening travel with you to Washington, and if anybody wants more information about AIPAC and what it does, I'm happy to continue to share that with you. David Glickman has a couple brief announcements, and then we'll conclude our service with Elenu and Kaddish. Shabbat Shalom.